go ahead and get started. So if you could please hit the recording. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing great today. What I'm going to talk about today is the questionnaires and the questionnaire process. And then we're going to have a live demonstration from Nick with the State Board of Finance. And so we're just going to go ahead and get into it. So today we're going to discuss an overview of the questionnaire process, questionnaire types. There are appropriations from previous years. There's also reauthorizations as well as current year appropriations. We're going to talk about some of the responsibilities of the grantee, and we're going to talk about some of the responsibilities of the state agencies. And then probably the best part of the presentation is when Nick's going to give us a live demo of the questionnaire system so you all can get familiarized with it. And then as we wrap things up, we can talk about the different processes between the post-questionnaire process and the actual budget upload. So it's important to keep in mind that when you're completing these questionnaires, they are legally binding. This process is for a legal certification for the project. And it applies to several different funding sources. It applies to the general funds as well as general obligation bonds or GO bonds and severance tax bonds. And what we're looking for, one of the things we're looking for in these questionnaires is project readiness. If your project isn't anticipating a start date for a year, that's probably a project that we view can wait. So what we're looking for is the project's going to be starting in the next few months, so that by the time that you all get your grant agreements, that you're going to be able to start the project and encumber or obligate at least 5% of those funds within the first 6 months. And it's also an opportunity to resolve any potential anti-donation issues. If you all have a third party or a nonprofit or some other organization that is seeking to help you use those funds, that this is an opportunity to get through that process. And also the responses. We need you all, if we have questions or comments or something needs to be addressed, we send the questionnaire back to you all and we need you to respond. Generally, people are pretty good with the responses. Typically, it's just one area or maybe two areas that need to be addressed. There may be a conflict in the responses, or we may just have questions from either staff or from legal counsel. And then I can say this because I don't issue grant agreements anymore, but grant agreements can be expected as early as July. But I will caveat that with, a lot of these state agencies, they're dealing with a huge amount of grant agreements. And so when I say as early as July, I mean as early as July. Due to volume, it may push into August or September, but in a perfect world, you could get them as early as July. So the questionnaire types, there are different types of questionnaires, and the first is the general obligation bond. So right now, those questionnaires are being reviewed by State Board of Finance. And then we also have appropriations from previous years. So from 2023 and 2024, you can see, if I'm doing the math correctly, 158 questionnaires from previous years. And those are going to be due next Friday, so April the 18th. And I've there's been less than 20 that have been submitted and approved to date. So I'm hoping that everyone was waiting to see the presentation before they start working on their questionnaires. But if you have received the link from your state agency, please complete those as soon as you can. We also have reauthorizations from Senate Bill 246 and Senate Bill 425. You can see there's a little over 400 projects. The caveat with that is I don't believe the reauthorization bill has been signed yet, but there is a possibility that either to be determined is because we don't have a final bill yet. And the same is true for House Bill 450. There's a lot of projects in that one. As you can see, a little over 1,400 appropriations. So all in all, in the next couple of months, between State Board of Finance and Infrastructure Division, we're going to be looking at, almost 2,000 questionnaires potentially. So again, I'll just hit on it again. The due dates, if you can please respect and be mindful of those due dates. We really want to get as many processed and approved for you all as we can. But it's a collaborative effort. We need you all to help us in that process. Also, we have resources. We have a lot of resources. We have instructions. We have FAQs. And for those of you that are interested, Nick's become famous on YouTube. So if you want to look at his YouTube instructional videos, those are super helpful as well. Also, the grantee's responsibility is to show us operating agreements, if you have them, even if they're not fully executed, if you can demonstrate that there's a potential to, in the next few months, have an operating agreement in place, that's something that we will consider in the approval process. And respond to questions from both the Infrastructure Division and Board of Finance, as well as our legal counsel may have questions as well. So your timely response in that process is greatly appreciated. And then this year, for severance tax bonds, Board of Finance is going to be asking likely for some additional documentation, and there was some litigation that occurred in Rhode Island, and it kind of brought to light the need to have this level of documentation for particularly the bonded projects. So what are the state agency responsibilities? We send out all the links to the state agencies, who then distributes it to the local entities. And so it's their responsibility to disseminate that information, because they have the best point of contacts of anybody, because you all work together on a regular basis. And so it's their responsibility to notify the grantees. It's hard to complete a questionnaire if you don't know it's out there and exists. And then our two divisions, Infrastructure and Board of Finance, are going to review and approve questionnaires dependent on the funding source. And a follow-up email will be sent for non-responsive agencies. I saw a question pop up, but I've only got a couple more slides. So once I get through that, I will answer that question and any others that people may have. It's also our responsibility to review operating agreements, specifically for concerns with anti-donation. We need to establish ownership and fair market value, and a number of considerations when we're talking about anti-donation. We also need timely audits, and with timely audits, we also need the state agencies to review those audits and make determinations as to whether there's going to be a special condition applied to an appropriation, whether fiscal agency is going to be required. So the state agencies, it's their responsibility to review 2024 audits and perform what we call the uniform funding criteria. It's also their responsibility to issue grant agreements. After we've gone all the way through the questionnaire process and all the budgets have been uploaded, it's the state agency's responsibility to issue grant agreements, to execute grant agreements, and to help everyone get these projects started. And then after the grant agreement, there's the processing of notice of obligations for encumbrances that happen at the local level, as well as making reimbursements. Here is our quick contact information. This isn't comprehensive of everybody in the infrastructure division, but it is every one of these people can answer your questions regarding questionnaires. The same is true for Board of Finance. Anybody on that list is going to be able to guide you and to assist you through this process if you have any questions. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nick Gonzalez with the State Board of Finance. And I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Nick.
I think Wesley has his hand up.
Go ahead, Wesley.
Okay, this question real quick. And so the question was, could they have a longer period of time to respond to questionnaires? And so I think, and Nick can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the questionnaires are typically sent to the state agencies for distribution to the entities because they have the contact information for those entities. And so it might be OSC just isn't giving you those links in a timely manner. So I think it's probably reaching out to Jonathan with ISC to make sure that he's getting that information to you all in a timely manner. We usually give, I think, like around a month or so, especially for new questionnaires for the new projects. So you shouldn't have just a 4-day turnaround. There might just be a 4-day turnaround for some like follow-up questions, but the initial the initial batches are usually pretty long, at least a couple weeks, if not longer. So so let me know, Serafina, if that's the issue. I'll get with Jonathan to try to get those out faster. I know sometimes it's an issue of he doesn't know who to send it to. Some of the Acequias, he doesn't have all their contact information. And so I've tried to do a better job, at least last year, with getting him the capital outlay requests and who submitted the request so that he has that information. But yeah, it should definitely be more than a 4-day turnaround. So let me know how we can help at DFA or even Board of Finance to get you to a longer turnaround time.
And I did see a question about can we, as grant recipients, start expending the money July 1st, or do we need to wait until a grant is executed? You should definitely wait until you have an executed grant agreement. That's a legally binding document. And you know, if you start spending money, there's no guarantee there was a hiccup in the budget process, or the grant is being withheld for any reason. So it's always best practice to wait until you have a grant agreement until you start incurring expenditures. Go ahead, Carmen.
Yeah, and you probably were going to go into this as well, but thank you, Scott. Also, you need to have an approved notice of obligation. So you have to go, if you have to go through your procurement process, whatever that is. And then once you've selected that contractor, whoever they may be, or the actual vendor that you're going to be purchasing equipment from, you need to get that approved. I know with DFA, anyway, I don't know with any other agency, it should be the same because we all follow the same. So you have to have that approved no, submit that. We get that approved for you as quickly as possible, usually within a 2-day turnaround, depending on what it is. And from there, you can start moving forward with that project.
Thank you for that, Carmen. I see Wilfred has a question. If you do have a question, go ahead and unmute.
I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button.
Oh, it's okay. I do see good morning. If an STB was issued in 2022 and the 5% was not spent, and we do not know the status of the funding, who can check for us? Was an application ever filed to receive this funding? I apologize, I am new to this and I have so many staff turnovers. So if you, and Nick, you can chime in on this one if you'd like. But if you have an appropriation that was made in 2022 and the project was not certified, then that's when the clock starts, when the bonds actually get sold. So if you don't have a grant agreement at this point, the 5% would not apply until the bonds are sold. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and we can look into it if you're able to provide a project number also.
Go ahead, El Valle. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Hello. I'm not new to the capital outlay process. Salvia has been very successful in getting and spending capital outlays in the past 15 years that I've been working. But I know that some things are changing, so I just wanted to reiterate what Carmen said. Now, before actually getting a disbursement, we have to get an NO approved when we get the approved quote or contractor that we want to work with prior to disbursements?
Yeah. I'm not sure if that was a question or a comment, but yes, the notice of obligation is critical in this whole process. It's basically a promise from the state agency that if you incur any expenses under that obligation, that you will be reimbursed.
Okay, just making sure, because in the past I've just done disbursements and then they've usually helped us fill out the NOs. But I just want to make sure now that I'm correct in getting an NO filled out before I ask for a disbursement, right?
Yeah, that's definitely definitely best practice, definitely lowest risk, is to complete the notice of obligation and have that submitted and approved by your state agency or your oversight agency prior to incurring any expenses. So I would say that's absolutely the best advice that we can give, is to do the notice of obligation before any money changes hands at the local level.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
Of course. Carmen, did you have
If I,
anything?
yeah, just if I may, Scott, just really quickly,
Sure.
and then we can let
course.
Nicholas begin. But again, you have to work with your state agency on who is actually administering that grant. I know in some cases, the agency prefers to work with you on completing that notice of obligation. So it's different, right? With the DFA, the local government division, we do, request that you do work with us, definitely, but the NOO needs to come from you. So it depends on the state agency again. So make sure that just to, reach out to your contacts there. And then, I know that we'll definitely help you with whatever you need as well. And yes, Elvia is amazing.
I see a question that asks, what agencies are exempt from submitting notice of obligations? To my knowledge, nobody. I think the confusion right now is, the process on whether they're, incurring expenses before or after submitting the notice of obligation. So nobody's really exempt or doesn't have to obligate those funds. It has to be obligated at some point. If you incur expenses first, you're taking a higher risk of those expenses not being approved. So always best practice is to do the notice of obligation first. There's another question. Could you help me understand what questionnaires for appropriations from previous years means? I have not seen a link to complete these. Is this reporting something new? So typically, if an entity is not ready to receive funding, or the project's not ready to get started, or you need to get into an operating agreement with a third party, the project may not be ready to move forward at that time. And then if that's what happens, and then 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, the project's ready to move forward, at that time is when we would have opened another questionnaire cycle from previous years. So this is going to be, I believe, the third opportunity for the projects on 2024. So that's all it means, is the project wasn't really ready to get started for one reason or another, and it's another opportunity to receive those funds. I do see a hand from Priscilla. I also see a question. We had an entity that doesn't want to do the questionnaire, so what do we do? That's from the state agency. I appreciate that. If they don't want to complete the questionnaire, you can't really force them to complete it. But it is in their best interest. It gives us some historical context. If they're not ready to move forward, that's fine. If they could please complete the questionnaire, that way we have some history on the questionnaires that have been processed in the past and the reasons why it hasn't. So I think if you can get them to complete the questionnaires, great. But if you can't, you just do your best. I saw Wesley.
And Scott, let me add on to that. John, if they're not gonna complete the questionnaire, the funds won't get budgeted. We won't budget the funds until the questionnaire is completed. So just realize that too. They don't have to complete it if they don't know what's going on with the project, or they don't think that they're going to be doing anything with the money within the next year or so. That's fine. But they just will not be able to receive the funds, or DOT should not issue a grant agreement until the funds are budgeted, and those funds will not be budgeted if there's no questionnaire completed.
So another question is, if you haven't received an email with a questionnaire, does that mean we do not have any funding awards? That's all it means right now. So as you may recall, the big capital bill from 2025, House Bill 450, that's going to be coming out soon. So if you haven't received a link, that's not a huge concern at this point. It doesn't hurt to follow up and just make sure, and you can reach out to either Nick or myself, or anybody here at the Infrastructure Division or Board of Finance, and we can help you out. Priscilla, I'm sorry, I went to another question, so I'm
That's
going
okay.
to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So one of the challenges that I'm having right now, and I think you alluded to this, but I just want to clarify and confirm what you're saying. So we have a few communities that are not EO compliant. They haven't been EO compliant for, I'm going to say, for at least a minimum of 2 years. That's one scenario. We also have entities and special districts, let me say, that have not been EO compliant due to not meeting what is the requirements of auditing and budgeting and those things. And so, in your opinion, should they even be answering a questionnaire? Because if we don't really have a final as to when they're going to be submitted, and in some cases they're given a date that it's going to be submitted, but then it gets to the date and it's not submitted, we're still holding up money that we shouldn't be holding up, at least until the next round of questionnaires comes up. Do I have that correct?
I would suggest that the entity complete the questionnaire. And the reason I say that is because we have a municipality that is having audit issues, but they recently submitted their 2023 audit, and they have plans to submit their 2024 audit in the next couple of months. So if that comes to fruition, it's released from OSA, and the state agency reviews it, and the project can get started before the next funding cycle, that is an ideal scenario. So I would suggest, even if they're just working on, previous year's audit or the year before that, I would still suggest completing the questionnaire, because you don't know what could happen.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
I think the last question is, how do we know if there was a questionnaire completed for a project? You could reach out to either Nick or myself. Be happy to look at that for you. You could also reach out to your state agency. That might be your best point of contact, because they do have a comprehensive list of all the projects, all the questionnaires that are being made available, and then we could check here to see if it was successfully submitted. I saw you pop on, Wesley.
I was just going to add on to that, not to get off topic too much, but we are going to have a new questionnaire system, hopefully available for the next round in the fall. And so in that system, our plan is for you to be able to log in and actually see what questionnaires are assigned to your entity and potentially where they're at. So so stay tuned for that. But for now, yeah, you'll have to contact Nick or Scott just to make sure.
Thanks, Wesley. And I think with that, Nick, we're ready for the demo. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nick Gonzalez. I'm the financial coordinator for the State Board of Finance. I'm just going to walk through the questionnaire process. I'm going to start out by sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes. It's the email link.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, so how it starts out is we upload our project list and our contact list, and the system generates emails that are sent out to the state agency contacts. So for example, any LGD projects are sent to Carmen. Carmen will receive this email. Here in the header under subject, you'll see it's for severance tax bond questionnaires. With the upcoming multiple waves of questionnaires, you'll see down here at the bottom, you'll either see severance tax bond for 2025, general fund projects for 2025, REOS severance tax bonds, REOS general fund projects, or general obligation bonds. You'll find that here under the wave. And then under entity or agency, for example, this link will be specifically for Bernalillo County. If you click their link, let me pull that up. This will bring up all projects for Bernalillo County. So even though the email came from Carmen, it'll include all projects. If you have projects tied to other state agencies, for example, this project's tied to the Department of Transportation. So we have that noted here that you may receive multiple emails from multiple oversight agencies, but it'll include all the projects tied to your local entity. Another email that oversight agencies will receive will state here under agency and finance and administration. So when they click on their link, they'll be able to see all projects tied to their agency. So as this list dwindles down, they'll be able to check which questionnaires have been completed for their agency. So I'm going to go back to Bernalillo County, and then we'll just walk through a questionnaire. So I already pre-populated some of the information just so I'm not typing and keeping us here any longer. So first section is project manager information. So you want to make sure you put a clear email here on who's going to be responding to any follow-up questions. And just make sure it's typed in correctly. If you have certain sections that aren't filled in, it will notify you and not let you move forward to the next section. Secondary contact, if you have two individuals who you want follow-up questions going to, you'll need to fill in this section. So the first question is the amount, appropriation amount, are you requesting the full amount or not? So if you are, or we'll go with it if you're not, you're requesting something less, it's asking if you're declining the funding or requesting less than the total appropriation amount. So here you're just gonna give a reason on why you're requesting less and the amount you are requesting. If you're declining funding at this time, you're gonna explain why you're declining funding. And if you click next, it'll end your questionnaire. So one thing I do want to note is after this question, you're not able to go back. So you want to make sure all the project information is correct and that the amount, if you're using the fully appropriated amount, you want to answer that correctly, or if you're declining the funding, you want to answer that correctly. So I'm going to go back because I already pre-populated a full questionnaire so we could walk through the whole questionnaire. So here the first question is to provide a detailed description of what proceeds will be used for. I would say this question receives the most follow-up because a lot of entities just copy and paste the appropriation language. We want you to be as detailed as possible. A lot of appropriations say plan, design, construct, and equip, improve, and they'll put all that, but we want to know exactly where that appropriated funding is. If you have $1 million worth of funding, is that going to be used for plan and design? Is that only going to be used for construction? And then here we even have in Q15 confirmed that the project description provides detail on how the funds will be spent and does not summarize or repeat the appropriation language. So we still have entities copying and pasting appropriation language and confirming, and then they will receive a follow-up email. So the way the questionnaire works, it's based off logic. So first question, will funding requests be enough to complete the entire project or a well-defined phase? If you select yes, you can move forward. If you select no, we ask additional questions asking if there's been additional funding sources secured. If not, we're asking, are you able to at least complete a well-defined phase? If this question is answered no, then it'll also stop your questionnaire. Because if you're not able to move forward with the project, with the appropriated funding and you don't have any other secured funding, then it'll complete your questionnaire for you. If you answer yes, we do ask for the types of funding. So what's the funding source, the amount, has it been secured, the expended to date of what's been secured, or the date it will be received if it hasn't been secured. The majority of the time we will follow up if the amount hasn't been secured to verify when you will know it will be secured, and also the date provided received, is that an accurate date? Does the project benefit the general public, fulfill a governmental function, or allow general access to use of public? These should all be yes, since they're capital projects.
Nick, just real
Again,
quick, I'm
yes.
sorry to interrupt you, but there was a question. They asked if there's a way to go back and make edits, or does it save as you progress? And I think probably another part of that question is after the submission, are they able to make edits?
So it's after the question on is this sufficient, or if you're using the full appropriation amount, where you can't go back after that section. But after that section, all these questions, you can go back and make edits. But it's just after if you're using the full appropriated amount.
Okay,
And
thank you,
then
Nick.
if I was able, or if I was to exit out right now, I could just go in and all my changes or all my updates are saved also prior to submission. There's also a question about what do you answer about previous funding for reauthorization. If it's the same project, those previous funding does not need to be answered because it's tied to that same original authorization. I'll answer that question at the end of this presentation for how you'll get a submitted questionnaire. Same thing, questionnaire logic. If you answer yes, you'll just be receiving additional questions asking for type of equipment, if there will be any additional warranties that aren't standard. So I think there may be some confusion regarding warranties. So if it's part of the purchase, it's just the standard agreement that comes with it. So you don't need to answer yes to this question. It's only if you're purchasing an extended warranty and you'll be using the appropriated funding for those extended warranties or service agreements. One thing I also want to mention regarding equipment that I've noticed now as we're reviewing the general obligation bond questionnaires is if your appropriation is for any vehicle, Q24 will need to be answered yes, that you will be purchasing equipment. And it just helps us get any idea if you're planning to buy an extended warranty, and our tax counsel will need that information. Same thing with the following questions, just logic. If you're intending to use the proceeds for reimbursement, as Scott had mentioned, we would suggest not making any payments or expenses prior to grant agreements being executed. So if you do answer yes to that question, we just require additional information. What types of expenses occurred? When did they occur? Especially when it comes to tax exempt bonds, we need to look into that, and those expenses might not be able to be reimbursed. Questions as far as refinancing or to repay prior debt obligation. And then are your other proceeds replacing any funding source that would otherwise be available to your agency? Same thing, if you answer yes, you'll just get asked additional questions. Has the project or any portion of it been included in one or more prior state or state bond or note sales? So we're asking this question, and we've had discussions with Wesley. In the future we'll probably include general fund, but we're asking about bond and note sales because they are constricted to that 5%, 85%, and we want to make sure that the funding is being expended. So if you do answer this question, we're asking for the type of bond. Is it STB, GOB, appropriation ID, the amount unspent, if it's been reauthorized, the new reversion date, and current status. If you do fill in this section and you do have an unspent amount, it will bring in additional questions just asking when do you plan on expending the remaining funding? Will it be spent prior to the reversion date? And it's just all to make sure we're following state law and the bond laws as far as 5% and 85%. Here's just a couple of confirmations you'll need to confirm to proceed in the questionnaire. Project start date. So the project's begun, you're just answer yes. We do have some logic behind this question. So if you say yes, but you put in a future date, it won't allow you. Or if you put in no and then put in a previous date, it won't allow you to move forward. We do have some follow-up regarding project start date because if the project funding becomes available, but the project start date isn't for 6 or 7 months, or not 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, a year after funding becomes available, we question that because this question, will you enter into one or more contracts 6 months after funding is available? And this is answered yes, but the project start date is a year later. That's a red flag for us to follow up. Just making sure, how are you going to make that 5% if the project isn't moving forward for another year, starting for another year? So again, just questionnaire logic, depending if you answer yes or no, we'll just and request why you won't be able to make that 5% when funding becomes available. If you answer yes, you'll need to confirm if the project will proceed diligently. And then also 85%, ask why that 85% won't be spent within the 3 years when funding becomes available. Here asking if there's any contingencies specified in the legislative appropriation. So that's just any contingencies labeled in the bill. And then are there any other contingencies, or obstacles? So this could be certifications, just anything that might delay the project start. I'm going to go ahead and answer the question on the project start date. So if it's already begun, that's fine. The thing is, if you're looking to get reimbursed for expenses that occurred with the appropriated funding, that's where it might become an issue. But if the project's already started and you had a previous funding source, or you have a funding source that's not related to general fund, STBs, GOBs, it's just a different source of funding, that's fine. You can just put start, that it's already started, the date it started, and current status. It'll raise a flag if you don't have any other funding sources that are funding those original phases or the start of that project. So here are the questions on ownership. Here, if the county owns the property, confirm the owner is a governmental entity. If it's not confirmed, I believe this might end the questionnaire, or it might just have a follow-up to confirm your response that the owner isn't a governmental entity. And then next question, will any other entity operate, use, service, or manage the real property or equipment being funded with these proceeds? If you answer this no, you'll go to the end of the questionnaire. If you answer this yes, you'll have additional questions on who's going to operate, use, service, or manage. Is it a governmental entity, private entity, nonprofit, or federal government? If any of the three, private entity, nonprofit, or federal government, are answered for these questions, we'll just want to know their role is at least operating management, just more detail of the role. Do you anticipate the organization will make any payments? And then if there's an agreement in place, if you click yes, we want to know if it's current or if it needs to be revised or extended. And then you'll also have the option to upload that agreement. If you click no, we'll just want to know when you're gonna get into an agreement or execute agreement, and then you can move forward with that. But if you click yes, you'll need to upload that agreement prior to moving forward. And then this will take us to the end of the questionnaire. You'll confirm and then fill in the authorized officer. A lot of local entities put the mayor, but you'll just put the authorized officer who you also want to be notified when the questionnaire has been submitted or approved. Once you submit, it'll be sent to our review queue. Scott, would you mind if I just went kind of through our review real quick and then you could go through yours?
Not at all. Go ahead, Nick.
So I'm just going to show you, once it's been submitted, it'll end up in our queue. So this is what our dashboard looks like for review. Now for general obligation bond, your project goes through multiple levels of approval. So you're going to have Board of Finance staff review your questionnaire. We have our bond counsel review your questionnaire. Our tax counsel is actually reviewing all questionnaires for general obligation bonds. And if you did answer on ownership, if there's a nonprofit or private entity involved and you upload your agreement, our board counsel is also going to be reviewing your project questionnaire and that agreement. They're with the Department of Justice. So it needs to go through all those levels of approval. If we have any not discrepancies, but if we don't agree, say I marked the project ready, but bond counsel marked it as follow-up, it ends up in this final project approval needed. So we'll go through those projects and have meetings with council to discuss what issues they saw and why we see the project ready and why they see it as follow-up. And then through this final project approval needed, we could either mark it as follow-up or ready. So in this final project approval, if we do mark it as follow-up, we submit it and the system automatically generates an email to the entity, and it should go to the project manager email. And it should look something like this. It'll give the project title, the appropriation ID, and it says requires follow-up for resubmittal. And it gives you a link to your questionnaire where you will need to make these updates. So in the email itself, it doesn't state what needs to be corrected, but when you open up your questionnaire link, so again, brings up your project information, but on the next page, it'll show you what needs to be corrected. So here, we're just asking in Q14, please provide a detailed description of where appropriated funding will be utilized. So you'll go to your question 14 here, just copied and paste the appropriation language. We just want more detail on where the appropriated funding will be. So again, go through the whole questionnaire, submit after you make your updates. So if we're all in agreement and a project is marked as ready, the following email will be sent out, just letting you know that your project review approval is complete. Gives project number, appropriation ID. It states that it has been approved by staff and council, but final approval will be determined by EO status. So as Scott had mentioned, if you're up to date with your audits and reporting, we get that list near the very end prior to our sale. And if that's all good, then the project moves forward as part of the bond sale. And then I'll let Scott explain for general fund projects, but I believe if that's all good, then those projects are able to get budgeted. And here is where we got the question asked if you could get a copy of the questionnaire. So it provides a copy of the questionnaire if it's been approved. We don't send a copy of the questionnaire for any follow-up. The reason being is because there'll be edits to the questionnaire prior to it being approved. So we like to send a copy of the approved questionnaire, and this will go to the oversight agency and the project managers, and I believe the authorized officers, and if not the authorized officers, it goes to the secondary contact email. Go ahead, Carmen.
Thank you so much. That was my question. And the reason that I'm asking is just always, I think, great for us to be able to see a copy of the questions prior. That way you can be prepared to answer those questions. But is it because it has so many moving parts that that's not, possible, or just wanting to know?
Yeah, no, I think we can provide something with all the questions. Let me work on that for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just hard because we won't be able to print like an exact PDF because of the logic behind it, because dependent on certain responses. And that might cause confusion also if they see all the questions and then they go into the actual system and they're like, well, why isn't this question populating, or why aren't we seeing this question? But we can probably put something together for you.
Thank you. And if not, I totally understand. After I asked the question, I said, oh, that's right. There's lots of moving parts. So,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So yeah, that's what will be received if the project has been approved. I think that's all I have, Scott.
Okay, I saw a hand pop up and then it came back down. I'm not sure if that person has a question. But in the interim, I'll just say our process is very similar to State Board of Finance. We work with our legal counsel to review and approve these. After everything's approved, we do check the EO status to make sure that the entity is eligible to receive those funds. So we break them out into 4 categories. One is ready; the project is ready to move forward. Another one is ready with special conditions. Another one is not ready for whatever reason, and then missing, or for those that didn't complete the questionnaires, we track that as well. And I see a comment that says, I'm always nervous about certifying the questionnaire in the event that I retire and won't be implementing the project in a few months. Yet I am required to certify the questionnaire. So you're certifying the questionnaire on behalf of the entity. It's not necessarily you personally, because people retire, people transition. The certification is the entity's certification, not an individual's certification.
And just to add on to that, you're certifying what you know at that moment. If the project at that time you think is going to move forward within the first 6 months, like that's the knowledge you have at the moment. So that's what you're certifying. If there's unforeseeable circumstances that happen and that project gets delayed, like that you had no control over, like that's understandable. You're certifying what you know at that moment.
That's great, Nick. Thank you for adding that. Are there any other questions? Please put them either in the comment section or raise your hand, or feel free to just take yourself off of mute. So the question was, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
No,
it's just, it's obligating 5% or tying 5% to contract. So you have 6 months from the sale of bonds or for general fund till the funding becomes available. But the more important is bonds, especially tax exempt bonds.
So Nick, can I just follow up on that question? It's Priscilla. I think the challenge we have sometimes in the rural communities around capacity, right, is the intent, right, is to spend the 5%. But sometimes with capacity issues at the local level, sometimes it's hard to meet that 6-month timeline. But I think part of the question is, does that work against them or affect them in any way? If it doesn't, I think if they're struggling to find, because that's part of the challenge. Sometimes we can't find contractors, or we can't find the consultants, or something happens with a procurement process. Those are the challenges we face sometimes trying to meet that 5%. And even if it's a vehicle, trying to get quotes sometimes can be quite a challenge. So I think probably part of the question is how do we bring comfort to that if we can't meet that 6 months? Is there some kind of penalty for that, or could you address that, Nick?
I think right now, we're just gonna be keeping better track of those projects that aren't able to make the 5%. And Don touched on a good point. Like in the questionnaire, we do say 5% expended within 6 months, but it's mostly obligating or tying to contract. Like if you're able to tie it to contract 5% of that appropriated funding within 6 months, that's what we want to see. It doesn't necessarily need to be expended, 5% expended within those 6 months.
Got it. Thank you so much.
And then there was
And
a
then
question from Debbie regarding on when bonds are sold. So when we send out our questionnaire memos, we usually include, I believe, the sale date of bonds. But for these upcoming sales, the GOBs will sale at the end of May, and then the STBs will sale at the end of June.
Nick, I have a question for you, not to put you on the spot, but um, when the bonds are sold, let's just say in June, it's usually the last week of June. Sometimes we don't issue the grant agreements, or DFA, or even some of the other agencies don't issue the grant agreements until July or August. So that 6 months obviously shrinks to like maybe 5 months or 4 months at that point. Can you speak to that at all? I mean, is it? And I know that it's tied to the bond itself. And I think when we thought about this, it's really more, is it tied to the grant agreement or the bonds? And so just clarify that if it is the bonds, then it is. I know with general fund it'll be tied to the grant agreement, but what's your response to that piece of it?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of tricky because I think from sale date we have 6 months for 5%. But in the state law, it says when funding becomes available, but funding becomes available when grant agreements are executed. So it's kind of just, I don't know, there's mixed information on that actual 6 months because, like I said, state law says something other than bond tax law. So, and I think it's just something we're going to track down more. Like it, as far as the 5% on, if you're not making that, it's just going to be notifying state agencies and local entities like, hey, where's this project at? We're not seeing any movement. Has 5% been encumbered? But right now there's no talks like you haven't made 5%. We're going to be reverting this funding or taking funding back.
go ahead, Don.
Okay, so I just wanted to speak to this 5% a little bit more because from my experience, when we issue the grant agreement, that's basically when the time frame begins because a project can't really begin until that grant agreement is issued. So obligating the 5% with a no does not mean that you are then bound forever to that particular vendor for those prices. Additional no's can be provided if that vendor changes, like let's say you find a different vendor between the time you submit the no to the time that you're ready to make a move on the purchase, and that next vendor has a better deal for you. You can always submit the next no, disencumbering the previous amount and then encumbering the new amount. So you have flexibility there. I don't want anyone to feel like they are then, completely committed to their initial vendor. It just requires you to work with us a little bit so we can give you some guidance on how to accomplish that process. So just know that there's flexibility there. And I did see a question in here from Sylvia that asked about if you can't obligate the 5% before the 6 months. We are trying to get everyone to obligate that because on the flip side of this, the legislative body looks at this information, and at the end of the day, they will want to know why those funds aren't at the very least being obligated. So I think in terms of the bigger picture, it's important for grantees to understand that obligating those funds will help you. It makes you look good. It makes you reflect that you are moving forward with putting your money towards your project. And again, you're not bound to those contractors. You can make changes if you find better deals. And we strongly encourage you to obligate that 5%, but I understand also, especially in our rural areas, that contractors are limited. But I think it's important that you communicate that to us, to your project manager. Let us know what that is, what the barriers are, because then we will have something to report to the legislative body when the question is posed. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks, Don. And that's just not a part of like the Board of Finance. We don't see that. We don't deal with notice of obligations or pay requests. We just see the overall project funding. So even as far as like amounts encumbered, we don't have that information that the state agencies have.
And there was a question, Nick, about what are the rules for contracting a specific vendor for the purchase of equipment? And really, that answer is following the procurement code. You can't unless it's a sole source or a rare exception. Generally, you just need to follow the procurement code, and for the purchase of equipment, it's going to be best obtainable price. So Rick had a question about how specific do you want us to get in the description of the project? Describe the project of the questionnaire. So this is, I think, hitting on what you said, just not copy pasting the legislative language. It's important to have a better understanding, particularly when it involves bonds, on what specific activities you plan to do within that appropriation language. So basically, it's an expansion, and the reason for that is to identify whether some of these activities that you're planning to do may or may not fall within that appropriation language. So there's a follow-up question on the procurement. Will this delay the use of the 5%, or can we speak with vendors prior to executing the contract? You can speak to whomever you like, but it is important that you follow the procurement code. There's statewide price agreements. There's cooperative purchasing with administrative fees, so I did want to note that. But following the procurement code, collecting bids, collecting quotes, that's all part of the normal process. And a vendor cannot necessarily be predetermined. It needs to follow the procurement process. So Nick, David had a question on the difference between state law and bond law about start dates. I don't know if you want to take yourself off of mute, David, and just expand.
Well, just that Nicholas has said something about there's a discrepancy between the state law and the bond law regarding when the actual start date of the agreement is.
Yeah, I'll need to do more research because I might have misspoke, but I believe the tax bond law just explains that 5% needs to be encumbered from the sale of bonds. And then our state in the capital outlay bill, it says 5% needs to be encumbered within 6 months of when funding is made available. And I'll have to go through and double check that. But when the funding is being made available is when we're saying grant agreements are being executed, which could occur a month, 2 months after the bonds are actually sold. So I'll need to just verify that with our tax council, but I believe like tax law says it's after the sale, but our capital outlay bill says when funding becomes available, which wouldn't be till after the grant agreement, where Wesley was saying you could lose 2 months, 3 months prior to that occurring.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
And Agatha asked for a link to the procurement code. If you want to just email me outside of this training, because we're about to wrap up, I'd be happy to give it to you. I'll put my email in the chat. So I think that's about all of the questions. Wesley, did you want to close us out?
Yeah, real quick, Scott. I think there was one question that we might have missed. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss it. When it comes to knowing which projects are about to revert, or I think not. I want to make sure I understand Agatha's question, or not Agatha, Debbie's question. Is there an email also sent when there's funding that will be reverted? I don't know. Did we answer that question?
I don't believe that we answered that question, and I think if the question is there a system generated email, I would say not to my knowledge. Generally, that's the responsibility of both the state agency and the grantee themselves. The quarterly reporting is required in CPMS, and that should be something that triggers whether you're running short on time. And so I think, yes, you may get emails directly from your project manager or your state agency, but in terms of a system generated email, I don't believe there's anything that notifies grantees of potential reversions.
Yeah, and I think as far as certification goes, I mean, it's 2 years. So for severance tax bonds, they have to be certified within 2 years. And then general fund, we use the same principle that they should be certified within 2 years. I know that it's in Senate Bill 275 for general fund projects, and it's also going to be in the new bill, House Bill 450. It was not in House Bill 505, Scott, just to kind of give you an idea. So those 51 that we had from House Bill 505, whatever's left over after that, we probably need to work closely with those entities to try to get them to become certified by the end of this cycle. But I don't think we can require it per the law. But I think we need to do our best to try to get those projects moving for sure. So.
So I did see a couple of questions that popped up. One is, how long does an entity have to become EO compliant in order to move forward with a project? And I think Wesley just touched on that. But you need for severance tax bonds, it's definitely 4 questionnaire cycles for 4-year projects. So that's 2 years. You have 4 opportunities within 2 years. For general fund, it depends on the language in the bill. And it says, in such cases, what is considered the official termination date for the project? Does the timeline begin from the original award, the date the EO compliance achieved, or the date the grant agreement is executed? And so the expiration date, the project expiration date, is a constant. So regardless of whether you're having EO issues or obligation issues, once the date is set at the end of that fiscal year, whether it's a 2-year or a 4-year project, that date is set unless, of course, the project is reauthorized. All righty, everyone. Well, on behalf of the Infrastructure Division, State Board of Finance, and the Department of Finance and Information, Department of Finance and Administration, we'd just like to thank you for your time, and please reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.